Is Venom still alive at the end of The Last Dance? During the final battle, the symbiote says goodbye to Eddie and sacrifices himself to stop the Xenophages, those nasty bugs Knull sent to Earth. Venom tries to fuse with several bugs at once, but he can't create a perfect bond with them because the Xenophages resist. He drags them into a part of a military base where there's a machine that pours acid. It's the only way to destroy the Xenophages, which can regenerate from nearly any damage, but Venom is also affected by the acid. Just before the symbiote disappears, there's a huge explosion that wipes out the entire base, and it's implied that Venom dies. Symbiotes are vulnerable to fire, so logically, Venom should have been completely disintegrated. But let's be real, we all know the rule. No body, no death. And I don't believe for a second that Sony would get rid of the only profitable character in their Spider-Man universe without Spider-Man. Plus, before separating from Eddie, the symbiote says this isn't a goodbye, but a see you later, hinting that they'll meet again. A piece of Venom might have broken off just before the explosion and stayed hidden. If a bartender and a cockroach could survive an Area 51 explosion, then so can the symbiote. It's just a matter of time before Sony announces Venom 4.
Yes! 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 Yes!
But don't get too excited. In the first post-credit scene, Knull says that Earth's champion is dead, and that the planet is now defenseless. He's talking about Venom, the closest thing to a superhero in Sony's universe. A bit earlier, we saw that Venom's codex disappeared after the explosion. This is key, because the only way to get rid of the codex is for the symbiote or its host to die. Eddie's still alive, so Venom must have died in the explosion, and we'll never see him again. But he can return, and we've been given a few clues. In No Way Home, and at the start of The Last Dance, we saw that Venom left two pieces of himself in two different universes. There's a piece of Venom in a bar in Universe 616, and a second piece somewhere in Sony's universe. If we go by what was said in Venom 2, any piece of a symbiote that breaks off from the main body can become a new symbiote, retaining the memories of the original. That's how Carnage was created in Venom 2. He was a tiny part of Venom that separated and became a new symbiote. So these two little pieces could grow back to full size and become a new Venom, with the memories of the Venom we know from this trilogy. It'd be like Venom never died.
He's alive!
And I know what you're thinking. Technically, these two pieces of Venom would be new symbiotes with new personalities, like Carnage. They'd be offspring of Venom, not copies of the original. But it's not like Sony cares that much about continuity. They could just say these new symbiotes are practically identical to Venom, so they look the same. Or that the offspring took the name Venom to honor their father. And that's it. We've got a new Venom, which is just like the previous one. It'd be similar to what Marvel did with Loki after Endgame. The real question is what happened to these pieces of Venom and who they'll bond with. The first piece was seen only once, in the post-credits of No Way Home. Before returning to his universe, Eddie got drunk, and a part of the symbiote was left on the bar counter in Universe 616, which is the main Marvel universe. We know this piece is still alive and looking for a new host, because in that scene, we see it barely move toward the bartender. If this new symbiote bonds with this guy, it'll regain its strength, like Carnage did. But this bartender won't be the new Venom.
Why not?
It would be really hard for them to bond completely, since Venom 1 told us that very few people are compatible with a symbiote. That's what made Eddie Brock so special, and it holds true in The Last Dance, where Venom has to separate from a horse just a few minutes after bonding with it. Otherwise, he would have killed the horse because they weren't compatible. The bartender will just be a way for Venom to get to a host who's 100% compatible with him, most likely Tom Holland's Spider-Man, who's in the same universe. We don't know if this will happen in Spider-Man 4, which will be released in 2026, or if we'll have to wait a bit longer. But in the original Secret Wars, Spider-Man bonded with the symbiote. It'd be a huge missed opportunity for Marvel not to make a Secret Wars poster with Spider-Man wearing the black suit, recreating that classic comic cover. With that poster alone, they'd be guaranteed $2 billion at the box office. Once Peter realizes the symbiote is making him more violent, he'd try to separate from Venom, and the symbiote would look for a new host who'd actually accept him. It could be an Eddie Brock variant from Universe 616, who hasn't appeared yet, or Mac Gargan, one of the criminals Spider-Man faced in Homecoming. He's been in prison since then. In the comics, Gargan became Scorpion and fused with the symbiote, turning into the most violent Venom ever. Gargan was a bit bonkers, so he did things even worse than Carnage ever did. He ate Skrulls, Asgardians, and even humans.
He's evil.
If Sony wants to go in a totally different direction from now on, it would make sense to adapt this version of Venom. We'd see the symbiote as a villain. His future appearances would be R-rated, and they'd stick closer to the comics. This child of Venom would know Spider-Man's identity. He would pass all his powers and abilities to Gargan, and have the character's iconic white spider emblem, which Tom Hardy's version always lacked. That leaves us with the second piece of Venom. At the start of The Last Dance, we see the scene with Eddie Brock in the bar again. Once he gets to his universe thanks to Doctor Strange's spell, Eddie argues with the bartender. Venom makes him a drink, and before leaving, they pay with a single coin. They totally trash the bar, and they still only left a single coin.
Cheap, cheap, cheap.
A part of the symbiote sticks to this coin, probably because Venom's body gets unstable if his host is drunk. The interesting part is that this isn't just a little wink to confuse people. This piece of Venom appears again later on in the movie. The angry soldier played by Mordo gets to this bar just before the bartender comes in contact with the symbiote and puts this piece of Venom in a test tube. He takes it to Area 55, a revamped Area 51, and we don't see the symbiote again. Some say this tube is the same one shown in the second post-credit scene, where we see that Area 51 was destroyed by an explosion. The bartender, who Mordo had kidnapped, escapes from the base, and we see a cockroach approach a broken tube. Is the cockroach about to bond with Venom and turn into a symbroach? I thought the same thing the first time I saw the film, but if we watch the scene in super slow motion and squint, we can see that this tube doesn't have any black Venom-like fluid. Instead, we see sparks and energy similar to those that came from this other symbiote. This is Agony, who bonded with Dr. Payne during the final battle. Coincidentally, this doctor broke the tube Agony was in and left it lying around. So this isn't Venom's tube, but Agony's. Of course, since Sony loves to mix things up, they could retcon this whole scene and say that this really was Venom's tube, but it doesn't matter anyway. We know the second piece of Venom was in this very same base. Maybe the symbiote stuck to the bartender's clothes and will bond with him to look for a new host. Or maybe he's still in Area 55, which was underground, and he will wait for days, months, or even years for someone to come close enough to bond with. But who will this symbiote bond with? There are three options. The first and most obvious is Eddie Brock. Tom Hardy said The Last Dance was the end of Venom's saga, and the closure they'd planned from the start, but he didn't say he wouldn't return in other projects. Maybe his character isn't exactly like in the comics, but these movies have done really well at the box office and have some fandom approval, so it wouldn't be surprising if Hardy makes a cameo in Secret Wars to excite fans. Eddie would be bonded with Venom again, because the symbiote would have bonded with various beings until it reached New York and reunited with him, and Marvel would come up with some excuse for them to face off against Andrew's Spider-Man.
I would like to see that.
It's also possible that Eddie could return in future Sony spin-offs. If we take the first post-credits seriously, Knull will escape his prison eventually and put the entire universe in danger. And who's gonna stop him? Madame Web? It's obvious that if they want to continue that story, Eddie will reunite with the symbiote, and more symbiotes will join forces with them to take on Knull. Sure, it'd be an incredible waste of a great villain. Knull should fight all the heroes of the Marvel universe, just like in the comics. But do you think Sony wouldn't do it? The second option is that Sony adapts the story of Agent Venom. During the final battle of The Last Dance, a soldier named Thompson lost his legs and was rescued by Mordo. It may seem like a minor detail, but do you know which Spider-Man character named Thompson became a soldier, lost his legs, and bonded with a symbiote? That's right, Flash. Wait, no, not that Flash. I meant Flash Thompson, Peter's high school bully. After graduating, Flash straightened out, joined the army, and bonded with the symbiote as part of Project Rebirth, a US government initiative to create new super soldiers. Flash carried out missions worldwide and fought a couple of Spider-Man villains, something that could be adapted to live action. This story would have a different tone from Tom Hardy's movies. Venom's design would feel fresh, since Agent Venom basically has a military-style Venomized suit, and Sony could finally do justice to Flash Thompson, who hasn't had a good adaptation since 2012. That was 12 years ago. Sony could keep telling Spider-Man stories without Spider-Man, because Agent Venom would fill that role. He could face Morbius, Vulture, Kraven, and the Sinister Six. But the problem is that Flash Thompson has no connection to Knull. Plus, there'd be lots of comparisons to Punisher and Deadpool, something Marvel might not like. But there's the third option. In my opinion, the best of all. This new Venom could bond with Eddie Brock's son. When they're in the hippie van, Venom tells Eddie he would have made a good dad, and Eddie gets really sad because he couldn't have kids with his ex. This isn't mentioned again. But what if Eddie did have a son, and his ex kept it a secret this whole time? If they don't want to complicate Anne's character, they could say Eddie had a son with another girlfriend, and that's it. The kid's name should be Dylan Brock, and he would bond with the symbiote to become a new Venom. This happens in the comics, kind of. Dylan's origin is a bit complicated because he's a hybrid, half human, half symbiote. At the beginning of Donny Cates' storyline, Eddie meets him, but the kid believes Eddie is his brother. After some time living together, Dylan finds out Eddie is his dad, meets the symbiote, realizes he has cosmic superpowers, helps Earth's heroes fight Knull, and bonds with the symbiote to become the new Venom for a while. If we leave out the cosmic superpowers, they could do all of this in live action. Tom Hardy wouldn't have lied, because he won't be the star of the next Venom movie, but he'd show up as a supporting character to advise his son. If they go this route, Sony would give us a fresh story, with new characters and a new tone, but they would still keep Tom Hardy to sell tickets. They wouldn't lose the audience audience who like this Venom trilogy, but they could make something more comic accurate, and the Venom from the previous trilogy would still be alive, just bonded with a new host. The thing is, Sony doesn't really care about what fans want. If they did, they wouldn't be making Spider-Man 4 a multiverse adventure. We explain why that is a terrible idea in this video over here.
I never loved